Hello everyone, welcome to Platonic Love Stories with another story. Let's move on to the video. My life in the suburbs was picture perfect to anyone looking in a big house with a sprawling backyard, a pristine pool that sparkled under the sun, a hard-working husband, and a 20-year-old son about to graduate college. But behind those closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. My husband Mike spent most of his time at work, and when he was home, he was glued to his phone or TV. The warmth we once shared had turned cold over the years, leaving me feeling invisible in my own marriage. It was a Saturday afternoon in early summer when I first noticed Marcus. He was my son, Eric's best friend, a polite, confident young man who had been coming over to hang out for months. I never really paid him much attention before, but that day, something shifted. Eric had invited Marcus to swim in our backyard pool from the kitchen. I caught a glimpse of them through the sliding glass door. Marcus stood on the pool's edge, his body glistening with water under the midday sun. His athletic frame was lean yet muscular, his dark skin flawless and smooth. He dove effortlessly into the water, resurfacing with a grin that showcased perfect white teeth for a moment. I couldn't look away. It wasn't just his looks that caught my attention. It was his confidence. The way he carried himself so different from my husband's distant and tired demeanor. I felt a strange stirring inside me, one that I hadn't felt in years. I brushed off the feeling and turned my focus back to the dishes, but my mind kept wandering back to him. Over the next few weeks, Marcus began spending more time at our house. He and Eric worked out together in our garage, played video games late into the night, and sometimes just lounged by the pool. Each time Marcus was around, I found myself hyper-aware of his presence one afternoon while Eric ran to the store. Marcus came inside for a drink. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mrs. Blake, do you mind if I grab some water?" Marcus asked, his deep voice startling me. "Of course, Marcus," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. "And please call me Amanda." He flashed that charming smile again. "Thanks, Amanda," as he reached for a glass. Our hands accidentally brushed. It was a small, fleeting moment, but it sent a jolt through me. I quickly pulled my hand back, hoping he hadn't noticed the way my breath hitched. "Sorry about that," he said with a chuckle. "It's fine," I murmured, my cheeks flushing after he left the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. What was happening to me? I was a married woman in her 40s. Yet here I was blushing like a teenager over a boy. Half my age, later that evening, I sat by the pool after everyone had gone to bed. The water shimmered under the moonlight, its gentle ripples mirroring the unrest in my heart. I couldn't deny it anymore. There was something about Marcus that drew me in, something I couldn't explain or control. I told myself it was just a harmless crush, something that would fade with time. But deep down, I knew better. The way he looked at me earlier that day, it wasn't just in my head. There was something unspoken between us, a spark that couldn't be ignored as the night wore on. I resolved to push these feelings aside. I was a wife, a mother, and I had a family to protect. But even as I made that promise to myself, I couldn't help but wonder, what if stay tuned to find out how one moment of weakness can unravel a life? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping, dramatic stories that dive into the deepest corners of the human heart. I tried to ignore the feelings, to bury them under the routine of my daily life. But Marcus made it impossible. His presence filled every corner of my home, his laughter echoing through the walls, his scent lingering in the air long after he'd left a room. It was a week after that night by the pool. When things took a turn, Eric and Marcus were playing basketball in our driveway, their shirts tossed aside in the summer heat. I had opened the living room window to let in some air, and their playful banter floated inside. I tried to focus on folding laundry, but my eyes kept drifting to Marcus when they finished playing. Eric ran inside to grab something from his room, leaving Marcus on the porch with a bottle of water. He caught me watching through the window and smiled. It wasn't just a friendly smile, it was knowing, like he could see right through me. My heart raced, and I quickly looked away, pretending to busy myself with the laundry. "Nice day, isn't it?" Marcus's voice startled me. He was standing just outside the window now, leaning casually against the frame. "Yes, it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You should come outside more. Mrs. Blake, get some sun," he said, his tone light but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "I'm fine right here. But thank you," I said, forcing a smile before turning away. But his words lingered. It wasn't just the suggestion. It was the way he said it. Like he was challenging me. Later that evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen. Cleaning up after dinner, Marcus walked in, his footsteps soft on the tile. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "No, I've got it," I replied, avoiding his gaze. But he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter, watching me. "You work too hard. You know that." I paused, the plate in my hand, forgotten. No one had said anything like that to me in years. "It's just what I do," I said with a small shrug. "Well, maybe someone should take care of you for a change," he said, his eyes locking with mine. My breath caught there. It was again that spark, that unspoken tension between us. I knew I should walk away, say something to end this, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in his gaze like a moth to a flame before I could respond. Eric came into the room, breaking the moment. Marcus straightened up, his easy smile, returning "Thanks for dinner, Mrs. Blake," he said before walking out with Eric, but his words hung in the air, heavier than I wanted to admit. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and fleeting touches. Once in the kitchen, our hands brushed again, and this time neither of us pulled away immediately. Another time, while walking past him in the hallway, his arm grazed mine, sending a shiver down my spine. I knew this was dangerous. I was walking a fine line, and one wrong step could destroy everything. But the more I tried to resist, the more I found myself drawn to him one afternoon while Eric was out running errands. Marcus stayed behind. I was sitting on the patio, sipping iced tea when he joined me. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Of course not," I replied, trying to sound casual. For a while we sat in silence, the only sounds the chirping of birds and the distant hum traffic. Then he turned to me. "You seem different lately. Everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond, just a lot on my mind. I said, "Finally, if there's anything I can do." His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment I felt something shift. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was a longing and need to feel alive again. Sometimes one decision can change everything. Will Amanda give in to her desires, or will she step back from the edge, like and subscribe, to follow this gripping tale of passion and betrayal? The moment I gave in was inevitable. Though I had spent weeks convincing myself otherwise, it was a humid Friday evening, and Mike and Eric had gone to a baseball game in the city. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that lets your thoughts wander into dangerous territory. Marcus stayed behind that night, saying he wasn't a fan of baseball. I didn't question it. Part of me was relieved he stayed. Part of me was terrified. I was sitting on the couch with a book, though I couldn't focus on a single page. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding up a glass of water. "Of course," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He sat beside me, closer than he ever had before. The air between us felt electric, charged with the tension we had been dating around for weeks. "You seem nervous," he said after a moment, his voice soft. "I'm fine," I lied. Though my hands trembled slightly as I turned the page of my book, he reached out and gently took the book from my hands, placing it on the coffee table. "Amanda, you don't have to pretend with me." Hearing him say my name like that, without the formalities, without the pretense, sent a shiver through me. I turned to face him, my resolve crumbling under the weight of his gaze. "I can't," I started, but the words caught in my throat. "You can," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I know you feel it too." And in that moment I stopped thinking. I stopped worrying about right or wrong, about the consequences that would come crashing down. I leaned in and he met me halfway, when our lips touched. It was like the floodgates opened, weeks of suppressed desire came rushing out, consuming us both. His hands were strong, yet gentle as they cued my face, pulling me closer. I melted into him, forgetting everything, except the way he made me feel. The hours that followed were a blur of passion and guilt. We moved from the couch to the bedroom where I had spent so many lonely nights wondering if my husband even noticed me anymore. Now someone did, but as the night wore on, reality began to creep back in. I lay beside Marcus, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. What had I done? "This can't happen again," I said quietly, though I didn't believe the words, even as I spoke them. "I don't think you mean that," Marcus replied, his voice calm and confident. I turned to face him, searching for some hint of doubt or hesitation. In his expression there was none. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You deserve to feel this way. Amanda, don't let anyone to my wounded heart." But they couldn't erase the guilt that had already taken root over the next few weeks. Our secret affair continued. We stole moments whenever we could when Eric was out. When Mike was working late, the thrill of sneaking around only heightened the intensity, but it also made me paranoid one afternoon, as we sat together on the patio. Marcus reached for my hand. I pulled away quickly, glancing nervously toward the house. "Relax," he said with a smirk. "No one's home. That's not the point." I whispered, my eyes darting to the windows, but it wasn't just the fear of being caught that gnawed at me every time we were together. I felt myself slipping further away from the person I used to be. The first crack in our secret came one evening when Mike found Marcus's hoodie draped over the back of a dining chair. "Did Marcus leave us here?" he asked casually. "Yes," I said quickly, my heart pounding. "He must have forgotten it after dinner." Mike raised an eyebrow but didn't press further still. The encounter left me shaken. How long before he started asking more questions, the answer came sooner than I expected. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, and the house was full of the usual noise: Eric and Marcus laughing in the backyard, Mike flipping channels in the living room, and me pretending everything was fine as I set the table for dinner. But everything wasn't fine. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and the weight of my secret was beginning to crush me. Every time I looked at Mike, guilt twisted in my stomach like a knife. Every time I saw Eric, I felt like the worst mother in the world. Marcus caught my eye through the kitchen window, giving me a small, knowing smile. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly looked away. I had to end this. I had to stop before it all came crashing down. But fate had other plans. It happened that evening. Mike had stepped outside to take a phone call, and Eric was upstairs showering after their swim. Maris and I were alone in the kitchen, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, my voice trembling. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. "You don't mean that I do." I insisted, though. My resolve wavered as he looked at me. "This is wrong, Marcus. It has to stop," before he could respond. The back door opened, and Mike walked in for a moment. I thought we'd managed to compose ourselves, but then his eyes narrowed, flicking between Marcus and me. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Nothing," I said quickly, my voice too high-pitched to be convincing. Mike's gaze lingered on me, then shifted to Marcus, Eric's friend. "Or not. You better explain yourself, kid." Marcus hesitated, but before he could speak, Eric appeared in the doorway, his hair still damp from the shower. "What's going on?" he asked. Looking between us, the silence stretched heavy and oppressive. Then, to my horror, Mike turned to Eric. "How well do you really know your friend's son, Dad?" "What are you talking about?" Eric asked, frowning. Mike didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of suspicion and betrayal. "Amanda, is there something you want to tell me?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. It was Marcus who finally broke the silence. "Mr. Blake, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Don't lie to me." Mike roared, slamming his hand down on the counter. The room erupted into chaos. Eric demanded answers. Marcus tried to explain, and Mike turned his fury on me. By the time the dust settled, the truth was out. Eric stormed out of the house, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Marcus left shortly after, his usual confidence replaced by a look of shame. Mike and I were left alone in the kitchen, the silence between us deafening. How long, he asked, finally, his voice hollow. I couldn't meet his eyes. A few weeks, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. A few weeks with our son's best friend, God, Amanda. What were you thinking? I wasn't, I said, tears streaming down my face. I was lonely. Mike, you've been so distant, and I don't you dare blame this on me, he snapped. You made this choice, not me. He stormed out, leaving me alone with my guilt and regret. The aftermath was a nightmare. Eric refused to speak to me, and Mike moved into the guest room. The house felt like a war zone, every interaction charged with anger and hurt. Maris stopped coming around, and I couldn't blame him. His friendship with Eric was over, and any chance of repairing my family seemed impossible. I spent my days trying to piece my life back together. But the damage was done. Trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild months later. I'm still living with the consequences of my actions. Mike and I are in therapy, though it's unclear if our marriage will survive. Eric has started to forgive me, but our relationship will never be the same as... For Marcus, he's moved on. I saw him once at a coffee shop, and we exchanged a brief, awkward glance before he turned and walked away. I've learned a hard lesson. A moment of weakness can destroy a lifetime of trust. Life is full of choices, and some can change everything in an instant. If you want more gripping emotional stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Click the notification bell icon to stay updated.